All right, team, let's dive into one of the biggest mysteries of all time, Atlantis. This isn't just some campfire story whispered in the dark. It's a legend that has gripped explorers, historians, and dreamers for centuries. Imagine a powerful, advanced civilization, a true island paradise that vanished without a trace. Sounds like something straight out of an adventure movie, right? Well, the first person to really put Atlantis on the map, so to speak, was a very famous ancient Greek thinker. His name was Plato, and he lived a long, long time ago, way back around 400 BC. He's the guy who gave us the first written accounts of this incredible lost city. Plato didn't just mention Atlantis in passing. Oh no, he gave us some serious details in two of his works, dialogues called Timaeus and Critias. He described it as a mighty naval power, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which most people think means beyond the Strait of Gibraltar, out in the vast Atlantic Ocean. Think about that for a moment. An empire out there, ruling the waves, thousands of years before many other great seafaring nations we know. Plato said this all happened about 9,000 years. That's an almost unimaginable stretch back into the past, a truly ancient mystery. Now, Plato claimed the story wasn't his own invention. He said it was passed down through his family, originally coming from an Athenian statesman named Solon. Solon, according to the tale, heard it from Egyptian priests when he visited Egypt. So we have a story traveling through generations and across cultures. It's like a historical game of telephone, which always makes you wonder how much of the original message stays intact. Did Solon get it right? Did the Egyptian priest tell the full story? These are the questions that start to bubble up when you look into a legend this old. The core of Plato's story is dramatic. Atlantis was this incredible place, rich and powerful, but its people became greedy and corrupt. They tried to conquer Athens and other parts of the Mediterranean world. But, the story goes, the brave Athenians fought them off, and then disaster struck. In a single terrible day and night of misfortune, violent earthquakes and floods supposedly consumed the island of Atlantis, causing it to sink beneath the waves, lost forever. It's a tale of hubris, downfall, and a cataclysmic end, the kind of story that sticks with you. To really get a grip on the Atlantis story, we need to transport ourselves back to Plato's world. We're talking about ancient Greece, specifically Athens, around the 4th century BC. This was a golden age of philosophy, democracy, art, and science. Thinkers like Plato, his teacher Socrates, and his student Aristotle were walking these very streets, debating big ideas about life, the universe, and how society should work. It was a time of incredible intellectual energy, a real powerhouse of thought that shaped Western civilization for thousands of years to come. So when a guy like Plato tells a story, people listen. Plato wasn't just a storyteller, he was a serious philosopher. He used stories or allegories to explain complex philosophical concepts. Think of them as thought experiments or teaching tools. He wrote about ideal states, justice, virtue, and the nature of reality. So, when he penned the tale of Atlantis, many scholars today wonder if he was creating a fictional example to make a point. Was Atlantis a real place he'd heard about? Or was it a carefully crafted narrative designed to teach his fellow Athenians a lesson about the dangers of pride, ambition, and imperial overreach? The historical context is super important here. Athens in Plato's time had its own history of being a powerful naval empire. They had experienced victories and defeats. They understood the sea, the challenges of governance, and the potential for a society to rise and fall. Plato might have been looking at his own city, its past glories, and its potential weaknesses, and using the story of Atlantis as a kind of mirror. It could have been a warning. Look what happened to this mighty empire when it lost its way. Let's not make the same mistakes. That's a powerful message for any society then or now. So when we consider Plato's Atlantis, we're not just looking at a potential lost continent. We're looking at a piece of writing from a specific time and place, created by a brilliant mind with particular aims. Was he a historian, faithfully recording an ancient truth passed down to him, or was he a philosopher, using a compelling narrative to explore deeper themes about human nature and the fate of civilizations? The answer might be a bit of both, or it might lean heavily one way. That's part of what makes this mystery so enduring and so fascinating to unravel. Plato didn't just say Atlantis sank, he painted a pretty vivid picture of what this place was supposedly like before its watery demise. According to his dialogue Critias, Atlantis was an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. That's huge. It was ruled by kings descended from Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. The capital city itself was a marvel of engineering and opulence. Imagine concentric rings of land and water created by Poseidon himself, protecting a central island where the royal palace and sacred temples stood. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, a perfectly designed, almost magical city. The details get even more specific. Plato describes canals connecting these rings to each other and to the sea, allowing ships to sail right into the heart of the city. The walls were said to be covered in precious metals, the outermost wall in brass, the next in tin, and the innermost, surrounding the Acropolis, flashed with the red light of orichalcum. Now, orichalcum is a mystery metal itself. Plato describes it as more precious than anything except gold. What could it have been? Some kind of natural alloy, or something else entirely? The descriptions paint a picture of immense wealth and advanced metallurgy. Beyond the city's defenses and layout, Plato tells us about the island's incredible natural resources. There were lush forests, abundant wildlife, including elephants, fertile plains producing 2 harvests a year, and mines yielding valuable metals. The Atlanteans were portrayed as having everything they could possibly need, a true utopia in many ways. They had temples dedicated to Poseidon and Cleito, his mortal wife, the first queen of Atlantis, adorned with gold, silver, and orichalcum, and filled with statues. They even had hot and cold springs providing water for baths and irrigation. It sounds like a paradise on Earth, but this paradise, as the story goes, had a fatal flaw. The divine nature of the Atlanteans supposedly became diluted over generations as they intermarried with mortals. With this, their virtue declined, and they became filled with unrighteous avarice and power. They built a massive army and navy and set out to conquer other lands. This ambition and moral decay, according to Plato, is what ultimately led to their conflict with Athens and their eventual divine punishment. The beautiful, advanced city, corrupted from within, was doomed to disappear. It's a classic tale of a golden age lost. Once Plato's story got out there, it didn't take long for people to start wondering, could this place actually be real? For centuries after Plato, many ancient writers and thinkers took the story of Atlantis as actual history. They believed Plato was recounting a genuine event, a lost chapter of the human past. Think about it. The idea of a super-advanced civilization that just vanished is incredibly compelling. It sparks the imagination and makes you want to grab a map and a shovel. The hunt for Atlantis, in a way, began almost as soon as the ink dried on Plato's papyrus. During the Renaissance in Europe, when ancient Greek and Roman texts were rediscovered and studied with fresh eyes, Plato's writings, including the Atlantis story, gained new prominence. Scholars and early explorers started to speculate about where Atlantis might have been, with the Age of Discovery kicking off and European ships sailing to the Americas and beyond. A whole new world of possibilities opened up. Some people thought the newly discovered Americas could be Atlantis, or at least connected to it. The sheer scale of the Atlantic Ocean suddenly seemed to hold countless secrets. One of the most famous early proponents of a real Atlantis, though in a more symbolic way, was Sir Francis Bacon in the early 17th century. He wrote a utopian novel called New Atlantis, depicting a mythical land of science and discovery. While his was a fictional work, it showed how the idea of a lost, advanced society continued to capture the imagination and inspire thought about ideal civilizations. Other writers and amateur researchers started proposing all sorts of locations, from the Canary Islands to Sweden, each trying to fit Plato's clues to a place they knew or suspected. The problem, of course, was the lack of concrete evidence. Plato's description was detailed but also vague enough to be interpreted in many ways. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules could mean many places if you stretch the definition. And 9,000 years before Solon, that pushed the timeline so far back that finding direct archaeological proof seemed almost impossible with the tools and knowledge of the time. So, these early hunts were mostly based on textual interpretation, speculation, and a whole lot of wishful thinking. But they laid the groundwork for more serious investigations to come. Section 5. Dusting off history, what archaeologists think today. So what happens when we bring modern science into the search for Atlantis? Archaeologists, geologists, and oceanographers have all taken a crack at this mystery, armed with tools and techniques Plato could never have dreamed of. We're talking sonar mapping of the ocean floor, deep-sea submersibles, advanced dating methods, and a much better understanding of ancient civilizations and geological processes. You'd think with all this tech, we'd have found Atlantis by now if it was out there, right? Well, it's not quite that simple, and the results are, let's say, complicated. The overwhelming consensus among mainstream archaeologists and historians today is that Atlantis, as Plato described it, was most likely a philosophical allegory, not a literal historical place. They point out that there's no unambiguous archaeological evidence, no ruins, no inscriptions, no artifacts, that directly supports the existence of a massive, advanced Bronze Age civilization that suddenly sank in the Atlantic Ocean 11,000 years ago. That's a big claim, and without big evidence, scientists tend to be skeptical. They argue Plato was a philosopher, not a historian, and he often used myths to illustrate his points. However, that doesn't mean the story has no connection to reality at all. Some researchers believe Plato might have been inspired by real, albeit smaller and more localized, historical events. For example, the massive volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BC, is a popular candidate. This cataclysmic event devastated the Minoan civilization, a very advanced Bronze Age culture centered on Crete and the Aegean Islands. The eruption caused tsunamis, buried settlements in ash, and could have led to the collapse of the Minoan dominance. The memory of such a disaster could have been passed down and embellished over centuries. Other geological events like large earthquakes or local floods in the Mediterranean could also have contributed to tales of sunken lands. The Black Sea deluge theory, for instance, suggests a rapid flooding of the Black Sea basin around 7,500 years ago. While not matching Plato's time frame or location perfectly, such dramatic events leave a deep mark on collective memory. So while most archaeologists don't expect to find Plato's grand continent-sized Atlantis, they are open to the idea that the legend might be a distorted echo of real ancient catastrophes and civilizations, woven into a philosophical narrative. Section 6. New maps, old tales, modern ideas about Atlantis. The search for Atlantis hasn't stopped, not by a long shot. Even if mainstream science is skeptical about a literal interpretation of Plato, the allure of the lost city keeps inspiring new theories and expeditions. Some of these modern ideas are pretty out there, while others try to connect Plato's clues to specific known locations using new interpretations or discoveries. It's a testament to how deeply this story resonates with our desire to uncover hidden truths and lost worlds. Everyone loves a good mystery, and Atlantis is one of the biggest. One popular modern theory, as I mentioned, links Atlantis to the Minoan civilization on Crete and Thera, also known as Santorini. The timeline is much closer to Plato's era, about 900 years before Solon, not 9,000, and the volcanic destruction of Thera was certainly a cataclysmic event. The Minoans were a sophisticated maritime culture with impressive palaces, art, and trade networks. Could Plato or his sources have gotten the time frame and scale wrong, but captured the essence of a powerful island civilization destroyed by natural disaster? It's a compelling idea. And Santorini's caldera, the remnant of that ancient volcano, certainly looks like a place where a legendary city could have vanished. Other theories look further afield. Some researchers have pointed to locations in Spain near Cadiz, suggesting that the ancient city of Tartessos might have connections to the Atlantis legend, perhaps being a colony or trading partner. There are even theories placing Atlantis in Ireland, the North Sea, the Caribbean, or even Antarctica before it was covered in ice. These often involve reinterpreting Plato's geographical clues, like the Pillars of Hercules, or suggesting that the story was transplanted from an even older, forgotten source. Each theory has its passionate advocates and its share of critics. Then there are more unconventional ideas like the Richat structure in Mauritania, Africa. This incredible geological formation, also known as the Eye of the Sahara, is a series of concentric rings that, from satellite images, bear a striking resemblance to Plato's description of the capital city of Atlantis. While geologists explain it as a natural dome that has eroded, its appearance is undeniably intriguing. Could Plato have heard descriptions of such a place, perhaps an ancient city built within or near it that was later misunderstood or mythologized? It shows how people are still actively looking for patterns that match the ancient tale. Section 7. Truth or tall tale, looking at facts and stories. So we're at the heart of the expedition, folks, when we lay out the evidence, what's fact and what's fascinating fiction in the story of Atlantis. On the fact side, we have Plato's writings. These are real ancient texts. We know Plato existed. We know he wrote Timaeus and Critias. We also know that ancient cultures like the Minoans did exist and suffered catastrophic destructions. The eruption of Thera is a scientifically proven geological event of immense power. These are tangible pieces we can hold on to, solid ground in a sea of speculation. On the story or myth side, we have the specific details that are hard to verify. The existence of a massive island continent in the Atlantic 9,000 years before Plato, with a civilization possessing advanced technology like orichalcum and concentric canals, is where we enter territory with no direct archaeological support. The sheer scale and the timeline are major stumbling blocks for a literal interpretation. Most scientists would argue that if such a civilization existed, we would have found some undeniable trace by now. Given our ability to explore the ocean depths and analyze ancient sites, the divergence often comes down to interpretation. If you take Plato literally, word for word, then Atlantis remains firmly in the realm of myth for most scholars because the physical evidence is missing. However, if you see Plato's story as an allegory or a heavily embellished account of a smaller real event, then you can find points of alignment. The Minoan theory, for example, tries to bridge this gap by suggesting Plato's numbers were exaggerated. Maybe 900 years became 9,000, and the location was shifted or misunderstood over time. It's an attempt to find a historical kernel of truth within the legend. Ultimately, the fact is that the story of Atlantis has had a huge impact on human thought and exploration for millennia. That's undeniable. The myth part, or at least the unproven part, is whether the city Plato described existed exactly as he said, where he said, and when he said. The beauty of this enduring mystery is that it forces us to constantly re-examine what we think we know about the ancient past, about storytelling, and about the human tendency to dream of lost, golden ages and hidden wonders. The debate itself is a fascinating journey. Section 8. The mystery lives on. Why we can't stop looking. Why, after more than 2,000 years, are we still so obsessed with Atlantis? What is it about this particular lost city that keeps us hooked generation after generation? I think it's because Atlantis taps into some very deep human desires and curiosities. It's the ultimate cold case, a puzzle with missing pieces that we're desperate to find. The idea of a forgotten super-civilization, more advanced than we can imagine for its time, is incredibly tantalizing. It makes us wonder what else might be hidden in the unexplored corners of our planet or our past. The story of Atlantis is also a story of paradise lost. Plato described a near-utopian society that had it all: wealth, power, advanced knowledge, but then lost it through its own failings and a cataclysmic natural disaster. This resonates with a common theme in human mythology, the idea of a golden age that ended, a perfect world that slipped through our fingers. We look back with a kind of nostalgia for something we never actually knew, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rediscover some of that lost wisdom or grandeur. Furthermore, the element of sudden, catastrophic destruction is both terrifying and compelling. The thought that an entire civilization could be wiped out in a single day and night of misfortune is a stark reminder of the power of nature and the fragility of human existence. In a way, searching for Atlantis is also about confronting our own vulnerabilities and our fascination with disaster narratives. We want to understand what happened, perhaps to learn from it, or simply to marvel at the sheer scale of such an event, even if it's only legendary. And let's be honest, the thrill of the unknown is a huge part of it. As an explorer, I can tell you that the greatest adventures often lie in chasing mysteries that others have dismissed. Atlantis represents the ultimate uncharted territory, both literally and figuratively. Every new technology, every unexplored seabed, every reread of Plato's text offers a glimmer of hope that a new clue might emerge. It's the ultimate what-if scenario, and as long as there are unanswered questions and unexplored places, the search for Atlantis in some form or another will surely continue. Section 9. My expedition thoughts: could Atlantis be real? So, after sifting through the ancient texts, the archaeological debates, and the modern theories, what's my take? Could Atlantis actually be out there, waiting to be discovered? Well, if you're asking me if I think we're going to find a massive, sunken continent in the middle of the Atlantic, exactly as Plato described it, with gleaming orichalcum temples and evidence of a society 11,600 years old, I'd say the chances are pretty slim. The scientific and archaeological consensus is strong on that point, and the lack of direct evidence is hard to ignore. However, that doesn't mean the story is pure fiction with no basis in reality whatsoever. I'm a firm believer that many myths and legends have a kernel of truth buried within them, echoes of real events or real places transformed over time by storytelling. The Minoan civilization and the eruption of Thera, that's a powerful candidate for inspiring parts of the Atlantis legend. The scale and timing might be off in Plato's account, perhaps due to mistranslations or the way stories evolve over centuries, but the core idea of a sophisticated island culture devastated by a natural cataclysm, that feels very real. I also think Plato was a brilliant philosopher, and he knew how to tell a compelling story to make a point. Atlantis served as a perfect cautionary tale for his Athenian audience, a warning against imperial ambition and moral decay. It's possible he masterfully wove together existing traditions, perhaps whispers of the Minoan collapse or other tales of sunken lands common in many cultures, into a narrative designed to teach a philosophical lesson. So it could be a blend, part historical echo, part philosophical invention. That makes it even more intriguing in my book. Ultimately, whether Atlantis was a real place or a powerful metaphor, its legacy is undeniable. It continues to inspire us to explore, to question, and to dream. And who knows, the ocean is a vast, mysterious place, and we're still discovering new things about the ancient world all the time. Maybe there isn't a single Atlantis, but many Atlantises, lost settlements, forgotten cultures, and untold stories still waiting beneath the waves or the sands. And that, for an explorer, is an incredibly exciting thought. The search continues.